Hey, confirmation students, this is for the week of September 27th, and the readings this week are going to start to drive us near the end of Genesis. I think we're actually going to finish Genesis this week.
No,
Yeah.
we'll finish Genesis
Next week. So we're getting close to the end. Genesis, again, as we talked about before, has so many great and helpful stories of the Lord's people from Abraham and following that lineage through. And these are all going to come up later in the Bible as like in the New Testament, where we hear about, we're kind of hearkening back to Jacob and all these characters that we hear about in Genesis. And really, Genesis reads kind of like a movie, or really like a soap opera. There's a lot of, especially for the readings you're going to have this week. So the soap opera here with Jacob's family. Remember, he had Jacob and his brother Esau, and Jacob flees from his brother after deceiving him. And long story short, he wants to marry this one girl, Rachel, and he gets kind of deceived and accidentally marries a different lady. And now, according to the scriptures, you marry who you marry. One spouse, one flesh. That's how the Lord institutes marriage. And Jacob already kind of deviated from that. He pursued a second wife at the same time, Rachel. So he's married to Rachel and Leah and has children through them. And then he has this thing called a concubine. How do you describe a concubine?
I don't know. Yeah.
How do you reverently say?
Well, how many sons did he have then?
12. So he has 12 sons all in all. So these concubines are essentially just women that were not necessarily his wife in the full sense, but just using these women to produce offspring, which is certainly wrong. So we see definitely these are called the patriarchs, those who are in the lineage of Christ, are flawed, just like all of us. They have sins, they have weaknesses, and yet the Lord still works through them to bring about good. But there's certainly disaster right and left because of the sin. So we have 12 kids now, and they're known as the 12 tribes of Israel that came from these 2 wives and 2 concubines from Jacob. And this leads up to, you can hit the next one there.
Okay, well the next one will be, Jacob remember he fled Esau, he has these 12 children, and now Jacob has lots of plots, because I'm shorter than he is, he likes to rub it in all the time, so okay, no, it's fine. Okay, so here's what the deal is that Jacob wants to return home, but here's the problem. Esau wants to kill him, or at least that's what Jacob thinks. So it's many years later, it's 20 years later, so Jacob brings all his children, and they go back towards Esau. But before they get to Esau, now Jacob, remember we talked about flaws and being a sinner? Now, this is the brave man. He sends all his wives and children ahead of him, rather than him being at the lead and potentially meeting Esau first. But then he's scared and prays to God, and God actually appears to him in the form of man, and Jacob wrestles with God. Jacob wrestles with God and says, give me a blessing. And God does give him a blessing and gives Jacob another name. His other name is Israel. Whenever you hear the word Israel, you need to think about Jacob and God's promises, and that from Israel comes these 12 tribes. And now you and your baptism are the new Israel of God. Well, anyway, they meet. Jacob meets Esau, and Esau does not want to kill him anymore. Esau forgives Jacob. And this is a wonderful story about forgiveness and forgiving those who've sinned against you.
And one I think, very helpful point in this is that we can recall Esau. Remember, he was the brother who wanted a bowl of soup so bad that he sold his birthright to his brother, and he really gets deceived by his brother Jacob. And when you're looking at this at first, like, he was really wronged. But as life happened, and life fast forwarded, we can look at Jacob, who had deceived Esau. He had a lot of hardship. He faced a lot of trials when he was trying to get the wife that he wanted and so forth. And so as we're reading the story, we're reminded that those who have been wronged by others, Esau being wronged by his brother, it actually worked out okay for him. So even though in this life, as people sin against us and people bring harm and wrong to us, the Lord has still promised to be with us and ultimately to bring things out for our good. Even though it might be certainly hard for us at times to think about how this could ever be good, God's going to work it out for good in His way. And so for Esau, it worked out okay for him. And speaking of which, to transition to Joseph.
Yeah, we got the Joseph cycle next. Joseph, even though he's not the oldest, is the favorite son of Jacob, and Jacob does play favorites. And what happens is Joseph's brothers hate him, and they decide to sell him to slavery to Egypt. So the story of Joseph is really a story of things seeming bad. But then but then God blessing, then things seeming bad again. And so Joseph is sold into slavery, Egypt, so he's never going to see his family again. Can you imagine that? Never seeing your family again? And your brothers did this to you? But then while he's in Egypt, as a slave, he rises up to a position of prominence as a favored slave. But then, because he wanted to do the right thing, his owner's wife lies against him, and he's thrown into prison. Well, in prison, there's a dream that comes to Pharaoh.
Which you'll read about.
Right, which you'll read about. And then Pharaoh will ask Joseph to interpret the dream. So Joseph will not only interpret Pharaoh's dreams, but then rise to the highest point. And here's the point about the story of Joseph, is that Joseph was faithful the whole time to the Lord, even though he did not know at first that being sold into slavery, being put in prison, would eventually lead him to being head over all of Egypt.
And perhaps the greatest quote that comes at the end of the book of Genesis is when Joseph is at the beginning. It's at the beginning of next week.
Yeah.
But we'll use this as an intro into next week.
Yep.
Is what Joseph says to his brothers is, what you meant for evil, God meant for good.
Yeah.
So what the devil, Luther famously said that the devil is God's devil. That is, while the devil does his evil things in this world, God still takes that evil stuff and is able to bring it about for good. So it is for you and the trials and challenges that you face in this life. While your enemies, those who are being mean to you, bullies and so forth, when wrong is done to you, definitely it was meant to be wrong by those who did the harm, and yet the Lord can still work it out for good. So for those who are facing challenges now in life, perhaps it's building character, perhaps it's sharpening your skills or something like that the Lord is going to be able to use later. And so we hold to that as the Lord's promise to us in the midst of our challenges. It's a long video today, so the Lord be with you.
God bless you.